and welcome to Ask GMBN Tech, the show where we answer your questions, and all you have to do is use hashtag Ask GMBN Tech down in the comments of any of our videos so that we can find it and answer it on a show like this. I believe you have the first question, Owen.
Yeah, indeed. It's a tiring question, but it's very good. Roger D asks, seriously, why can't tyre manufacturers make consistent tyre sizes? Or words to that effect. Full question's up there. He's bought a 2.5 tyre that size is more like a 2.3 and 2.4s that size like 2.3s. Can't they just measure them? I mean, lots of tyre brands do. And, you know, we talk about 29er, and that's sort of a rough outside diameter. It's not really a 29er size. There's lots of weird idiosyncrasies within sizing.
Yeah, 29 is 29 inches, but it's not actually, the wheel isn't 29 inches at all, is it? It's kind of the average 29 inches, including the tyre. So
yeah,
even that's not standard.
Exactly. I think, you know, there are standard bodies like ISO and ETRTO that are trying to work with tyre brands, and tyre brands are trying to work with them as well. The problem is that lots of tyres are designed around a set rim width, and as you get narrower rims, or now we get wider rims, it means that changes the profile of the tyre quite a lot. More so with smaller tyres, so if you get bigger tyres, it's less of an issue. But it just means that it's really tricky for tyre brands. A couple of different tyre brands tried to do a measurement where you'd measure the outer carcass and the kind of the knobs on the side. But again, that's not been a standard. Surely that would
change as the rim
It would also change as well,
anyway.
But there was sort of like guidance on a certain rim. More and more manufacturers are getting much, much better at listing what rim the tyre is designed around. So some 2.4s are designed around probably a 25mm rim, and then 2.6s are designed around a 30mm rim. And putting those different tyres on different rims will create different profiles. So it is a bit of a mess, but there is some science that you can cling to. So hopefully that helps.
My question is from Stevie V, and he said, or she said, should I get a Camelbak or are bottles fine? Why do people even get them? I mean, it's personal preference here, but some of the reasons that people get them is that maybe their bike doesn't take enough water that they need. So some bikes can only take one bottle rather than two. Some bikes can only fit 500 mils in there, and that might not be enough water. So a reservoir on your back will sort of solve that issue. You can also get handy sort of integrations of back protectors as well, if that's handy for you. If you're racing or doing bike parks in Europe, you often need a back protector, and this can be integrated. Some people prefer that. You can also get filtration devices if you're out in the middle of nowhere, and generally some people just prefer sipping out of a straw on the go rather than reaching down to get a bottle. And you certainly get less mud, dirt and sheep poo on your Camelbak straw than you do with a bottle that's sort of down closer to the action. So why do they use it? Many reasons, and it is personal preference at the end of the day. But hey, Camelbak do some great podium bottles as well, so I'm sure they won't be offended if you don't go for one.
Tomps, 2006, has got a really good question here. Is the maximum user weight rating on a bike something to go by? Is it mostly tested on the frame, or is it the suspension components? So this is talking about the user overall weight for a bike. And he's asking, would upgrading the suspension from the stock suspension, so maybe on an XC bike it might have a 32 or a 34 suspension, to something burlier like a 38, would that raise the maximum weight that you can ride on that bike? It's a really good question. It's quite a complex topic, but essentially lots of different brands set a maximum user weight, and that's not just the user, but it's a, I guess, overall system, isn't it? So if you're carrying lots of bike packing gear and lots of water, so if you're really close to it and then you're going to take 5 litres of water and that tips you over the edge, that is the overall system weight. So yeah, I think, say, Canyon and other brands have got limits for a lot of the cross-country stuff that's really lighter, and that's the whole bike. So upgrading the suspension, like you've said, if you're going to put a 38 on a cross-country fork, or a cross-country bike, well, I think the suspension would be fine, but the frame would wouldn't take it. Yeah,
no, it would still have a maximum load weight on that.
Exactly, yeah.
Especially if it's carbon. It's what they're effectively saying. You know, anything heavier than that on that frame might actually damage the frame itself. It might be too fragile to take a rider that heavy. And generally, I've seen it before, if a rider is heavier than the max recommended, you will actually void the warranty. So if you break it, they won't replace it.
Yeah, so I mean, it is a really good question. I guess if you're erring on the side of caution, get a slightly sort of like burlier bike that was in your kind of overall system weight. You can change tyres to something really quick rolling and fast rolling, and that will give you the kind of lightweight, fast feel that I think you might be looking for. But yeah, let us know. And if you've got any more questions, do send them in to us.
My question from Champion Gaming here, who says, I'm 177 centimetres tall. I have an Orbea from 2022 in size medium. I feel like I have too much weight on my hands. Sometimes when pedalling and after adjusting the saddle height, I think I could benefit from shorter handlebars. What do you think? I mean, often your gut instinct is right. There's a couple of things that might cause you to have too much weight on the handlebars. You've talked about width of handlebars. Certainly if you start to widen your handlebars, that will pull you down and may put more weight onto your hands. Sometimes your stem could be, or your handlebars and stem combination could be too high or too low. Either way can sort of do it for you depending on your body ergonomics. Now, stem height is something easy to play with, so you can remove your stem and take some spaces out from underneath, or vice versa, to change the height of the stem. And maybe playing around with 5mm difference might help you understand a bit more about the relationship between you and your weight on your hands and your bike. Width is harder to play with. You can try and bring your hands in a little bit and bring your levers and your gears in a bit to try and sort of get a feel for having your hands further in without committing to cutting. But if you're happy to cut it, then try and do it 5mm on each end at a time. So don't make big jumps. And also, when you've made a change, sometimes it takes a little while for our bodies to relearn this new position. And I would say try and do one change at a time and ride it for a couple of rides, maybe a week or two, before you decide whether it's right for you or not.
Cool. Good question here from Tim. He's a big fan of the Easy Bleed Shimano brakes, but where did the hydraulic fluid go? Does it leak somewhere? He's never seen my brakes show any signs of leaks, but eventually they all need a bleed. This is a really fun question and got some head scratching. I think there's a couple of different things going on. So you've got, yeah, you're right, good brakes are very good, and often they are, 99% airtight, but over time they could let in some air. So that's why you're going to get bubbles. I guess the other thing is that you're going to get wear on some of the seals. And if you think about a brake, just the caliper alone, there's quite a lot of seals just in the caliper, and then you've got even more in a lever. And if you've got kind of clever linkages and hydraulic actions where there's kind of leverage and flow changes in a lever, there's even more seals. So if each of these sort of degrade down a little bit, you're going to get detritus from that. Also, you're going to be heating your brakes a lot. And so with the mineral oil from Shimano, it's pink, and it does show the colour change really, really well, because if it's been well worn and you've raced in the Alps or you've dragged your brakes a lot, it will change colour. So where does the fluid go? I guess microscopically, some of it is migrating out of the system. I think some of it is probably from these seals, so it's maybe just a little bit over time. You've also got the sort of diaphragm in the brakes. This is sort of like a little rubber bag that changes shape a little bit. And depending on which brake you've got, sometimes they're relatively big and they can move a lot, and sometimes they're quite sensitive and relatively brittle. So you could get air loss from that as well. And also you could get, seal loss from that. So that's why it's so dirty. I mean, that's mineral. DOT is a very different sort of scenario, because DOT, although it's got a higher boiling point, so therefore shouldn't degrade as much as some of the mineral oil systems, it does absorb water. So if you've got any air bubbles in that system and you haven't bled it amazingly well, which even with the best bleed kit, there might be a little bit of air. And what can happen is that volume of air will have some moisture in, and then that'll absorb into the fluid, which changes the fluid. It means that it's not the same consistency, it's not as thick, and that's why you can get kind of spongy brake lever, because as your fluid heats up, those air pockets and that kind of moisture in the fluid heats up as well, and it just gets all a bit messy.
But equally, mineral might not absorb water like Dot, as Tim Sadler probably knows because he's quite tech genius. It does repel water, and so sometimes that water can ingress in various places through the pistons, through seals, whatnot, through the hoses even. Microscopic pores will let that in, and it will actually just pool at some stage. And if you were to heat up the fluid in the system, that could reach boiling point and actually release air into your system as well. And don't forget, there's dirt and air that might be getting in through your pistons, various places. So it might not be that you're losing fluid at all, but air just might be getting in some way, and that's why you need to bleed them every now and then. Shame, but happens. My question from Pafano, who says, I've got a budget hardtail labelled as 120mm. However, the stanchions seem to be measuring 105mm. Have I been scammed, or is there some kind of spacer or limiter? Right, you've mentioned their zoom forks, but I don't know what model they are. Suck down is something we hear quite a lot with modern air forks, and it is easily solved, but only if you have specialist tools and the know-how to do it. I'll leave a link to a video we've done previously in the description below so that you can see what happens. But generally with air forks, sometimes there can be a blob of grease somewhere from factory that's blocking a little hole or a dimple that allows the air to balance between two chambers as your forks move. Now, if there's too much air in one and it's not balancing, it can actually lower itself in travel and suck down. That's why we call it suck down. If you have coil forks, I can't understand why they would have less, but you said you've just bought it from a bike shop, or you've just bought it. Hopefully it's from a bike shop or an online shop where you can contact them and get a bit of advice, or maybe some free service in order to fix them. Well, that's all we've got time for, so thank you very much for watching, and if you have any burning questions right now, then use hashtag Ask GMBN Tech down in the comments below. Thanks again.